Welcome to the Afternoon Doodle with me, John Hendrick. Today's episode, Op Art Easter Eggs. Hello, fellow artists. This is John Hendrick here for today's edition for the Afternoon Doodle. For today's drawing, I want to incorporate an art movement called op art. Now, if you're unfamiliar with that art movement, I'll give you a brief background. Basically, it started in the 1960s by artists such as Bridget, Victor Vasarely, and what they strived to do is they wanted to create art using optical illusions, right? So they would kind of play around with people's sense of perspective, and they did it in all sorts of ways, whether they were changing the thickness of a line from the middle to the edge to make it appear like it had depth, whether they were changing the curvature of a line or changing color. They would really play around with people's sense of perspective and how they would view the object, flat or three-dimensional. So, with that idea in mind, I had a great idea for a drawing assignment for today. It is a few days before Easter, and I was thinking what would be more fun than creating optical illusion Easter eggs, like this one. So, what do you need for an assignment like this, you might be wondering? Well, there's a couple of different options. I myself am going to be using markers and crayons. However, if you'd rather use colored pencils or oil pastels or watercolor or any other medium, you're more than welcome to. In addition to those coloring supplies, I'll also need a ruler and a regular pencil. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. The first step is to draw an oval shape with a smaller top and a wider bottom, hence an egg. Next, using the ruler, I'm going to be drawing a straight line up my page, but notice that I'm stopping the line when I hit the oval and I'm continuing it on the other side of that same oval. Once I block it out in pencil, I'm going to start choosing the markers I'll use for the assignment. And once that's done, I'm going to start going over those straight lines in those markers. Once I finish going over all the horizontal lines in this drawing, I'm going to start sort of towards the middle. I'll start with the green line. I'm going to curve the line slightly downward. I'm going to follow that for the length of the egg. Then, starting with the yellow, I'll start curving the lines upward. The next step will be creating patterns inside these sections. The trick here is whatever shapes you use, start smaller, and as you get towards the center of the egg, make those shapes larger. And then make them smaller again as you get to the following edge on the other side. Try to be as diverse as possible. Use a different shape or line or mark in each section. The next step in this process is to start applying color to each section. I'll be using crayons for this. So, a trick that I like to use is whatever line is at the bottom, so in this case orange, I'll color everything from that line up also in orange. And I'll do that for each section. So just like before, I'm looking at the pink line and I'm going from that line upward. So I'll be coloring that section in pink. And if you do have any shapes within the egg, be sure to color those in too. In order to create depth, I'm going to darken the outside area around the egg. And I'm going to choose a slightly darker color than the one I used for that strip. And not only am I choosing a slightly darker purple or slightly darker color for each section, I'm also pressing a little bit harder. In crayons, this will create a darker tone that will translate to a shadow around this object. I'm going to do that for each individual section. Here's a couple of optional steps. One, I can take a color to sort of unify all of them together, like either like a dark gray or a black, or even like a dark blue, and just kind of go over the edges a little bit more to sort of bring each section into each other. Another option as well, if you have a gray marker or something lighter or a blender, you can actually go over each section like I'm doing here to create even more unification and depth around the egg. And of course, feel free to add any message you want across the top. In this case, Happy Easter. Alright, well there you have it. Thank you very much for checking out this video. It's a great fun activity to do right before Easter using the op art style and just kind of changing around a couple of things, the curvature of your line, the darkness of your color, the size and placement of a shape. You can create some really cool optical illusion inspired artwork. Well, that's it for this edition. Hopefully you try it out, and please share with me anything that you draw. I would love to see it. And that's all. This is John Hendrick saying happy doodling, everybody. Markers. You need colored pencils. I messed that up. These are crayons. Okay, let me stop that here.